Once upon a time, in a peaceful kingdom surrounded by rolling green hills and sparkling rivers, there lived a kind and gentle girl named Cinderella. Her real name was Ella, but everyone called her Cinderella because she was often covered in cinders from the fireplace. Long ago, Cinderella had lived happily with her loving parents in a beautiful house filled with laughter. Her mother was warm and kind, and her father was a respected merchant who traveled often but loved his daughter dearly. But happiness, like the seasons, sometimes changes. When Cinderella was still very young, her mother fell ill and passed away. The house that once echoed with music and joy became quiet and heavy with sadness. Before her mother left this world, she held Cinderella's small hands and whispered softly, "My sweet Ella, always remain kind and brave. No matter what happens, goodness will guide you." Cinderella never forgot those words. A few years later, her father remarried, hoping to bring warmth back into their home. But the woman he married was proud and cold-hearted. She came with her 2 daughters, Anastasia and Drizella, who were just as selfish and unkind as their mother. At first, Cinderella tried very hard to welcome them. She smiled kindly, shared her toys, and helped them around the house. But the stepmother saw Cinderella's natural grace and beauty and grew secretly jealous. After Cinderella's father left on a long journey and never returned, everything changed. The stepmother slowly took control of the house. Cinderella was moved from her warm bedroom to a small, dusty attic. Her beautiful dresses were replaced with old, worn clothes. Day by day, she was given more and more work. Cinderella, her stepmother, would call sharply every morning, clean the floors, wash the dishes, feed the chickens, and so Cinderella worked, and worked, and worked. Yet, something magical about her never faded. Even while scrubbing the cold stone floors, she would hum sweet melodies. Birds often gathered near the window to listen. Friendly mice scurried beside her feet, and Cinderella treated them like her dearest friends. She named the bravest little mouse Gus, and his clever friend Yak. They adored her because, despite her hard life, Cinderella's heart remained full of kindness. One bright morning, the entire kingdom buzzed with excitement. Trumpets sounded from the palace towers. Royal messengers rode through every street, announcing important news. Hear the, by order of the king. A grand royal ball will be held at the palace. Every eligible young lady in the kingdom is invited. The king hoped the prince would finally find someone to marry. When the news reached the house, Anastasia and Drizella screamed with excitement. A royal ball. We must have new gowns. The prince will surely choose one of us. The stepmother smiled slyly. Of course he will, my dears. Cinderella listened quietly from the corner, her heart fluttering with a tiny spark of hope. She had never been to a ball, never worn a beautiful gown since her childhood. Gathering her courage, she softly asked, "Stepmother, may I also go to the ball?" The room fell silent. Then her stepsisters burst into cruel laughter. "You, at the royal ball?" Anastasia mocked. Drizella sneered, "You'd scare the prince away." But the stepmother raised a finger, pretending to think. "Well," she said slowly, "you may go. If you finish all your chores, and if you find something suitable to wear." Hope bloomed in Cinderella's heart. That day she worked harder than ever before. She scrubbed every floor until it shone. She washed piles of laundry. She polished silver until her hands ached. Meanwhile, upstairs, her stepsisters demanded endless help. "Cinderella, fix my sash. Cinderella, curl my hair. Cinderella, bring my shoes." By evening, Cinderella was exhausted, but she had finished everything. With a hopeful smile, she hurried to the attic and opened an old wooden chest that belonged to her mother. Inside, carefully folded, was a simple but lovely old gown. "It will do," she whispered hopefully. While Cinderella stepped away, her little mouse friends got to work. With tiny needles and great determination, Yak and Gus, along with the birds, decorated the gown using ribbons and beads the stepsisters had thrown away. When Cinderella returned and saw the dress, her eyes filled with tears of joy. "Oh, it's beautiful." "Thank you, my dear friends." Vaz. The evening sky turned deep blue. Cinderella carefully put on the gown and walked downstairs, her heart pounding with excitement. For a moment, when she entered the room, everyone froze. Even in the simple gown, Cinderella looked graceful and radiant. But then the stepmother's eyes narrowed. Anastasia suddenly gasped, "That rabbinet's mine!" Drizella shrieked, "And those beads mine too." Before Cinderella could speak, they lunged forward and tore the dress apart in their jealousy. Rip! Snap! The beautiful gown was ruined. Cinderella stood frozen as the carriage rolled away, carrying her stepfamily to the palace. When the house finally fell silent, she ran into the garden and sank onto a stone bench, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I only wished," she whispered brokenly. Suddenly, a gentle, warm light filled the garden. Cinderella looked up in surprise. Standing before her was a kindly old woman with sparkling eyes and a soft smile. "Why, hello, my dear," she said warmly. "Did you really think I would miss this evening?" Cinderella blinked in wonder. Who are you?" The woman chuckled. "I am your fairy godmother." With a graceful wave of her wand, magic shimmered through the air like falling stardust. "Now then," the fairy godmother said cheerfully, "let's get you to that ball." She turned toward the garden. "First, we need a carriage." She tapped a large pumpkin. Bibbidi-bobbidi-boo. The pumpkin glowed, stretched, and transformed into a magnificent golden carriage. The mice were turned into handsome horses. A sleepy old dog became a proud coachman. Cinderella gasped in amazement. "Oh, fairy godmother, it's wonderful!" But the fairy godmother raised a gentle finger. "Why two can't go dressed like that?" With one final swirl of her wand, bibbidi-bobbidi-boo, Cinderella's torn dress shimmered and transformed into the most breathtaking gown in the kingdom, a sparkling, flowing masterpiece that glowed like moonlight. On her feet appeared delicate glass slippers that sparkled with every movement. Cinderella stared in disbelief. "Is this really me?" The fairy godmother smiled warmly. "Of course, my dear, but remember the magic will only last until midnight. When the clock strikes 12, everything will return to the way it was." "I understand," Cinderella promised. With a hopeful heart, she stepped into the golden carriage. As the carriage rolled toward the brightly lit palace, Cinderella felt something she had not felt in a very long time.